These are the most basic sewing needles you can get in any supermarket. This one, you see, is not sharp at the end. This could be used for knitting projects, but this is not for sewing because it wouldn't go through the thread. So this is not the case, and it's way too big. Don't start with needles like that, because see how tiny the eye is. It's so tiny. You might be struggling to put the thread through. So this is a side. Any of these three have a really nice size and it will be easier to thread. I'll go for the biggest one. You need to choose your needle, the thickness of your needle, accordingly to the thickness of your fabric. So this is quite a thick needle, and if you go and punch thin fabric with that, it will leave like a hole. So you want thicker needles for thicker fabrics, thinner needles for thinner fabrics as a basic rule. Okay, how do you thread it? Before cutting the thread, I want you to thread the needle with the thread still attached to the spool. So you put it through, right? You want to make sure that this end of the thread is nice and smooth. If it's a bit fluffy, you just cut it off to make it nice and clean. It'll be easier to thread. Here we go, it's in. And why do I say keep the thread on the spool? Because you want to make sure that the knot is on this side. If you cut the thread right away, you don't know, you might forget on which side you want to tie your knot. And it is important because of the thread memory. If I tie the knot on this side, there is a higher chance that the thread will be doing the usual thing that cables do. And as you're sewing, it will create loops and you will be just so frustrated. And to avoid this, you just want to make sure that you tie the knot on this side of the thread. And the easiest way to remember to do that is to thread the needle and right away tie the knot. You can cut it later. How do you make the knot? Take your index finger and put it around a couple of times, and then you just roll it. Okay, so that's what I get. And then again, just let it in between your fingers and it forms a knot. It can be quite big and quite ugly. It doesn't matter because in this course, if we're using the knots, we'll be using them only for temporary stitching. Once again, around the finger, roll, and pull like that. You can just practice making knots for a while. That doesn't harm. Another question you might ask, why am I tying the knot only on one thread? Why don't I cut two threads, put them together like this and make the knot? Like that, yeah, double threaded. It should be stronger, it should be better. No, because when we're using hand stitching, we usually fix something quickly with hand stitching instead of pinning, because it could be something a bit more delicate and you need more precision. But if I do something like this and my threads go and mess around and create loops and knots on the way, I cannot just quickly unpick it and correct it. Also make sure that knots are appropriate sizes to the needle. See, this is way too tiny, so it will go through the hole. It needs to be bigger than the needle a bit. So the fatter the needle, the bigger the knot. Okay, that's better. And now I cut it. See when it's threaded, the side without the knot is shorter. So the knot stays in the fabric and we're sewing with that. And you always want to have just one layer of the thread. Don't make it too short because it will be the chance of it getting out. Make it like kind of 1/3 of the entire length, okay? And why it's important that one side remains open, because if you make a mistake and you need to correct just one stitch, you can get your needle out. And if it was knotted like that together, your needle is locked in between. This way it's free. So usually you would stitch two details together. For example, we will need this when we work with scrunchies, but also if you're working with something maybe you're not comfortable pinning, we put pins to connect two details and then we stitch with a sewing machine. But if you're uncomfortable with pins, you can always make quick hand stitches. Needle goes in, both layers, out. I'm not teaching you any fancy hand sewing. This is not the case. This is just learning how to thread the needle and to connect two pieces temporary. And then when you put the machine stitch, you unpick this layer. You won't have this left. You get it out. That's it. In and out, in and out. This is very brutal, very big stitches, which are perfectly fine for what you will need in this course. If I cut it right here now, the stitch will go loose, right? I don't want that. So I need to put another knot. So how I do this, I put another stitch like that. And see the loop is getting created. And then I put my needle through this loop. And it makes a knot good enough to keep it together. What you can also do, if you don't want to do this, you can just put two very, very tiny stitches next to where you just finished, kind of to the side. Take them away from the end of your stitch. Something like that. It also works. In this scrunchie, I'll be showing you how to use small stitches. So they'll be really tiny, and you just regulate it by understanding that I put here, if we put the needle here and it comes here, that's a smaller stitch, right? That's it, that's the size. If I put it here, that's a bigger one. That's it. So you don't need any specific skills here. This is just punching thread with a needle with a thread. That's it. And see, and this ones are really easy to unpick.